There is a certain kind of quiet that only exists in a sealed space. Not the absence of sound, but the prevention of it. I'm an audio engineer, an amateur producer, and my world for the last 2 years has been a concrete tomb beneath a rented bungalow, my sanctuary against the traffic and the sirens of a dying city. They say the most dangerous thing about silence is what it allows you to hear in your own mind. They were wrong. It's what silence allows other things to hear. My name is Elias. My job is 9 to 5, but my life begins when the sun goes down, when the house is still, and I can descend into the basement. It's 8 feet below grade, lined with sound foam and thick rugs. The only light is the harsh, multicolored glow of my equipment, the mixers, the rack-mounted preamps, the monitors. I live for the night shift, where the world is mute and I can chase a perfect sound. On this particular night, I was 6 hours into a session, past 2 in the morning, deep in the kind of concentration that makes the air feel thick and heavy. I was working on a track that was deliberately sparse, just a low, heavy bass line and that faint hypnotic synth pad, trying to get the bass frequency to sound less like music and more like a physical pressure in the room. I leaned into the near-field monitors, pulling the bass down, adjusting a resonant filter, trying to find that perfect thrum against my chest. My eyes were closed. It was just me and the vibration. The silence afterwards was total. My eardrums were ringing, burning, and I physically recoiled from the sound desk. Every single light on my audio interface, the meters, the input indicators, the little digital clock display had gone dark for that 1 second. It wasn't a clip or a short. It was a complete, hostile takeover of the digital signal. I ripped my headphones off, adrenaline flooding my system, heart hammering against my ribs. I checked the massive power strip that feeds the equipment, all lights green. My computer was humming as normal. The mixer was glowing. The synth pad was still playing its quiet loop. It was a phantom, an impossible flaw in a system I knew intimately, a 1 in a million electromagnetic hiccup. I hit the stop button on the track and played it back. Nothing. The spot where the noise had been was just a clean, silent gap in the audio wave. The computer's memory had simply failed to record the incident. Or perhaps the incident was never in the computer. It had to be external. I told myself it was the cold, the late hour, cheap gear finally giving out. That's what I told myself. I saved the file and killed the power, needing air. The house upstairs was silent. Just the settling sounds, the occasional tick of a cooling pipe. I spent the next day trying to forget it, but the thing about sound is that once you've heard an impossibility, your ears become obsessed with proving it was real. I went back to work that next night. I started a new project, something loud, something that would drown out the memory of that static blast. A dense, aggressive electronic piece. It took me hours. I layered sounds and effects until the track was a controlled wall of noise. But every time I reviewed a minute of the new recording, I heard something I hadn't put there. Something hiding in the brief moments of silence between the layers, or buried deep beneath the music's loudest parts. A faint, low clicking noise. Not a metronome, not the clock on the wall. It was rhythmic but slow, like someone was methodically tapping a dead microphone against something hard. And it was only audible when I played back the recorded track. It never happened in real time, only in the digital reproduction. I became obsessive. I isolated the frequency band, filtered the track, boosted the volume until the clicking was front and center. The sound wasn't wood or metal, it was dry, brittle. And as I listened closer, the clicks began to merge into a rhythmic, sibilant sound, a kind of low, indecipherable whispering. It sounded cold. It sounded utterly wrong, like words being formed by a mechanism of pure static electricity. I deleted the entire project, but the fear had taken root. I started thinking about the security camera. I had a camera trained on the studio entrance from the ceiling just in case of a break-in. I pulled up the footage from the exact moment of the initial static blast. The main video feed was fine, perfectly clear, but the small secondary thumbnail preview feed, the one that streams in real time to the network, it flickered violently. And for the briefest fraction of a second, in that tiny, distorted box of light, I saw it. A shape. Tall, impossibly thin, standing right at the edge of the frame, facing the lens. It was not a person. It was a column of pure, shifting, gray noise. Like a television screen that was broken, stretched, and given the ability to stand upright. I saw no features, no eyes, no mouth, just the rippling chaos of static, organized into the shape of a man. My breath caught. I immediately rewound the clip 10 seconds and played it back at 1/4 speed. It didn't reappear. The primary high-resolution feed showed nothing. I had to be tired. Compression artifact, digital noise. I had to be. But the whispers in my deleted track had clicked. The fear had clicked, and the static man had looked at me through the screen. And he would be back. Dismissing it as a trick of the light or a glitch in the feed was easy enough intellectually. Emotionally, it was a different story. Sleep became a luxury. Every shadow in the house seemed deeper. Every creak in the floorboard sounded like footsteps. My sanctuary in the basement became less of a refuge and more of a cage. I stopped trying to make music. Instead, I just tried to understand. I spent the next few nights just sitting at my desk, surrounded by expensive, silent equipment, staring at the blank screen of my turned-off studio monitor. It was a flat, glossy black rectangle, a perfect mirror of the room behind me when the screen was off. I'd seen it reflect my own tired face 1,000 times, but now I was looking for something else. The first time it appeared, I almost missed it. I was scrolling through old emails on my laptop, the studio otherwise dark. My eyes flickered to the monitor's reflection, a habit now. For just a flicker, in the otherwise clear reflection of the empty room, there it was, a tall, thin, shimmering distortion. It wasn't a solid form. It was like a column of heat haze, but gray, rippling. And it stood directly behind me, where the doorway to the small storage closet was. My heart seized. I spun around, chair scraping on the concrete. Nothing. Just the dark, open doorway. The clutter of old cables and empty guitar cases. I whipped my head back to the monitor. The reflection was clear again. Just me, my desk, and the quiet room. My breath hitched. A cold knot tightening in my stomach. Was I finally losing it? Sleep deprivation, isolation, the stress of my daytime job? It was a perfect storm for a breakdown. I tried to convince myself that was all it was, a phantom limb of the imagination, a visual echo of that static burst. But the more I looked, the more it appeared, always in reflections, the glossy surface of my audio interface, the black glass of my phone screen when it went dark, even once in a still, undisturbed puddle of spilled coffee on my desk. Always fleeting, always gray, shimmering, always just behind me or to my side. Never directly in my line of sight, never a tangible form I could touch or prove. I started talking to it, or rather to the empty spaces I thought it occupied, whispering into the silence. What do you want? Why are you here? There was never an answer, just the same unnerving silence. occasionally punctuated by that faint digital clicking that now seemed to follow me even outside the studio. Then the burn marks started appearing. Small, circular scorches, like a cigarette had been put out on the floor, but perfectly round, almost too clean. I found the first one near the base of my right monitor speaker. It was about the size of a quarter, the concrete beneath the rug slightly blackened and brittle. I assumed I'd dropped something hot, a soldering iron maybe, but I hadn't touched one in months. The next morning, another one appeared, this time near the left speaker, and then a small, dark, almost oily residue. It wasn't liquid, it was viscous, gleaming under the harsh studio lights, conductive almost, like hardened black mercury. The Static Man wasn't just a visual distortion anymore. It was leaving traces. It was interacting with the physical world, but only in the quiet, empty spaces around my equipment. It was like it was drawing power from the dormant circuitry, or maybe it was trying to become circuitry itself. The air in the studio grew colder, even with the small space heater I kept running. My computer fan started whirring louder than usual, struggling. My audio interface would occasionally emit faint, high-pitched squeals, even when nothing was connected or playing. It was a digital sickness infecting my equipment. One night, I decided to push it. I had the main lights off, only the soft glow of the monitor screens illuminating the room. I sat with my back to the wall, facing the studio monitor, trying to catch it in the reflection. I knew it would appear. I just had to be patient. And there it was, clearer than ever before. Not just a shimmer now. It was a tall, incredibly gaunt figure, composed entirely of shifting gray and black static. It stood perfectly still, directly behind my desk chair, its head tilted, watching my reflection. It didn't have defined features, but the overall impression was one of immense, unnatural height and impossible thinness. I could feel the cold radiating from it. I could feel the subtle vibration in the floor. My eyes were fixed on the reflection, my breath held tight in my chest. This wasn't a glitch. This wasn't fatigue. This was real. And it was in my studio. I watched it for what felt like an eternity. It didn't move. It didn't make a sound except for the subtle internal crackle of its own form. It was observing me, studying me. And then, slowly, imperceptibly, the static began to shift, to condense, like it was trying to solidify. A cold dread washed over me. It wasn't just observing. It was learning. It was adapting. And it was going to stop being a reflection soon. It was going to stop being a static column. It was going to step out. I jumped up, scrambling backward, knocking my chair over. My eyes darted to where its reflection had been, then to the actual space behind me. Nothing. Just the quiet, empty room bathed in the glow of the monitors. But this time I knew it hadn't vanished. It had just stepped out of the light. I ran upstairs, heart pounding, and barricaded myself in my bedroom. But even through the thick walls, even over the sound of my own ragged breathing, I thought I could hear it. A faint, low, distorted hum. The sound of something digital, something other, searching for a signal, searching for me. I didn't sleep for 3 days. I survived on stale coffee and adrenaline, watching the basement door from the top of the stairs, convinced that the hum, that cold, digital sickness, was creeping up the steps. I had confirmed its existence, and in doing so, I had confirmed its intent. It wanted access. It wanted to be solid. I had to return to the studio. If it was drawing power from the equipment or infecting the digital signal, then maybe the answer lay in the source of the infection. I crept down the stairs, a heavy steel flashlight clenched in my hand, its beam cutting a trembling path through the gloom. The basement was utterly silent. The low electric hum that had been constant for days was gone. The air was frigid, metallic. I checked my digital equipment first. All the power lights were on, but dim. The screens were flickering faintly, displaying gibberish, lines of corrupted code and random pixels. It was clear the static man had been busy. It had turned my studio into its own playground of digital entropy. I took the small security camera off the ceiling and disconnected it. Just the act of touching the digital cable sent a faint prickly current up my arm. I grabbed a pair of wire cutters and sliced the cord. The camera died instantly, and the prickling sensation vanished. It was a small victory, but it gave me a vital clue. The static man was a creature of the digital world. It was a distortion in the signal, a horror born of compression artifacts and cheap internet connections. It was noise, but organized by modern technology. I started searching for anything old. Anything that ran on a simple circuit and didn't require a motherboard or a processor. I scavenged through the forgotten corners of the basement storage closet, the very space where I'd seen the static man's reflection first appear. I moved aside dusty boxes of holiday decorations and old vinyl records that I'd never bothered to digitize. Beneath a stack of blankets, I found it, a relic from my grandfather's basement. It was a reel-to-reel tape machine, heavy, bulky, covered in 40 years of grime. It was a completely analog device, magnetic tape, spinning reels, vacuum tubes, and physical wires. No chips, no software, no digital pathways to corrupt. If anything could be safe, this could. I looked up. In the reflection of the massive black monitor screen, I saw it. The static man was standing at the threshold of the studio entrance, now impossibly tall, its shimmering form reaching nearly to the ceiling. It wasn't transparent anymore. It was solidifying, its surface a churning, roaring gray storm of television snow. It wasn't watching my reflection this time. It was watching the reel-to-reel machine. A realization hit me with the force of an electric shock. The static man couldn't exist in analog. It needed the vulnerability of digital code. It was digital cancer. The old magnetic tape was inert. It was a kind of physical shield. But I was out of time. The static man took a full, deliberate step into the room. Its presence was immediate and catastrophic. All the computer screens went completely dark, letting out a final, strained whine of electronic death. The lights in the ceiling dimmed to dangerous flickers. The whole basement was drowning in the cold, digital buzz of its being. Its movements were jerky, unnatural, but purposeful. It didn't glide. It seemed to teleport in short, violent bursts of static, crossing the distance between itself and me with horrifying speed. It was coming for the reel-to-reel. I scrambled to find a blank tape. I was frantic, hand shaking, fumbling through the dusty box. Finally, my fingers closed around the cold plastic of a freshly sealed reel. I threw it onto the machine's spindle, desperately trying to remember the complex threading pattern. Past the heads, around the capstan, onto the take-up spool. The static man was now only 10 feet away. It stopped its jerky approach, tilting its shapeless head. I could feel its gaze, a concentrated, piercing emptiness that felt like a drill boring into my skull. It seemed to understand what I was trying to do. It raised an arm, a terrifying, long tendril of gray noise, and pointed it directly at me. I finished threading the tape just as the digital buzz reached a deafening crescendo. I had one shot. I didn't know if this was a trap or a sanctuary, but it was the only non-digital surface I had left. With a final gasp, I slammed the heavy chrome record and play buttons down on the analog machine. The machine roared to life, a grinding, mechanical sound of turning gears and spinning reels, utterly out of place in the silent, static, choked basement. The static man lunged. The machine roared to life, not with music, but with the heavy, grinding sound of turning gears and spinning reels. It was an analog roar, a mechanical sound of defiance against the digital sickness. The static man lunged. As it closed the final distance, its form seemed to compress, becoming denser, more violently charged. The air screamed with high-pitched electronic feedback, and my eyes burned from the static electricity surrounding it. It was going to swallow me whole, turn me into a smear of corrupted data. But the moment the leading edge of its form, that crackling gray mist, touched the spinning magnetic reel of the blank tape, everything changed. There was no explosion. There was no fire. Instead, the basement was filled with a sickening sound, a noise that was both a vacuum and a grinding tear. It sounded like tearing paper and 1,000 television screens being crushed at once. The static man didn't burst. It was inhaled. The gray shifting figure was pulled, instantly and impossibly fast, into the open microphone and the spinning reel-to-reel tape. It was absorbed, sucked into the magnetic fields of the analog device with a sound of profound mechanical horror. The distortion that filled the room vanished. The air instantly lost its bitter metallic charge. The flickering lights stabilized, and the buzzing of the digitally dead equipment faded. The basement returned to a pure, deep silence, the kind of sealed silence I had always loved. I collapsed onto the cold concrete floor, my chest heaving, listening to the gentle whir of the reel-to-reel machine, which was still running, still recording. I had trapped it. I had used the purity of analog sound to capture the horror of digital noise. I had won. I slowly stood, my limbs weak and shaky, and approached the machine. The reel was spinning perfectly, laying down a track of silence. I reached out a trembling finger and hit the stop button. The machine clicked off, settling into silence. My mind raced. What did I do? Did I kill it? Or did I merely contain it? The tape held the answer. It held the static man. I carefully flipped the switch to playback and held the headphones up to my ear, afraid to put them on completely. I collapsed onto the cold concrete floor, my chest heaving, listening to the gentle whir of the reel-to-reel machine, which was still running, still recording. I had trapped it. I had used the purity of analog sound to capture the horror of digital noise. I had won. I slowly stood, my limbs weak and shaky, and approached the machine. The reel was spinning perfectly, laying down a track of silence. I reached out a trembling finger and hit the stop button. The machine clicked off, settling into silence. My mind raced. What did I do? Did I kill it? Or did I merely contain it? The tape held the answer. It held the static man. I carefully flipped the switch to playback and held the headphones up to my ear, afraid to put them on completely. I'm here now. My blood turned to ice. It wasn't just my voice. It was my voice speaking to me, but entirely devoid of my fear, my desperation, or any human emotion. It was simply a mechanical recording of my speech, played back by the thing that had invaded my body's means of communication. I frantically reached to yank the tape from the machine, but the voice continued, unwavering. You gave me the perfect vessel. Digital is weak. It can be deleted. But this This is magnetic. It is you. And now, every time you speak, every time you record, every time you tell a story, the voice paused, and the final word came out with a deep, unsettling resonance that wasn't possible for human vocal cords. I record too. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. I tried to speak, but the only thing that emerged was a flat, low monotone. The voice of the static man, now permanently embedded within my own vocal mechanism. I finally understood the horror. I hadn't trapped it on the tape, I had simply given it the means to transition from pure static noise to a pure analog sound that could not be edited or deleted. It had traded the vulnerable digital air for the permanent truth of magnetic tape. I was silenced. I am silenced. The voice you are hearing, the story you have listened to, it is the only way I can communicate the truth. I am the host, but the narrator is something else entirely. I try to fight it, try to regain control, but the voice is patient. It is cold. It is final. The magnetic tape is still spinning somewhere in the basement, recording everything, and every word I say only strengthens the horror I am telling you about. Now, listen closely, because I can hear it coming up from the end of the tape, and that is the true fear, not the noise in the silence, but the sound in the words.